Like to welcome you. It is sharp 4 o'clock. I would like to welcome you, Robin, for accepting our invite, which is further strengthening the relationships with you uh, as far as IIC and IT Data Bank is concerned. This is the fourth talk in the Power Talk series, where we are going to hear from you. A very warm welcome. Dear friends, if I take just 1 or 2 minutes by introducing Mr. Robin Banerjee. He is serving as Managing Director of Caprians India Limited. He is based in Mumbai. Before introducing him, I would like to say he is a great human by soul and having a great relationship with IACA, also a member of Board of Studies of Independent Directors Data Bank. In terms of his professional journey, he is a senior professional with more than 3 decades of experience with several large multinational corporations across 20 countries. By qualification, he is a chartered accountant, cost and management accountant, company secretary, and also possesses a master's degree in commerce. In terms of his associations, he has worked with a number of reputed companies in private sector. It would not be possible for me to name all of them, but he had been associated with Unilever, Hindustan Unilever. He had been associated with ArcelorMittal Germany as managing director as well as chief finance officer. He has been executive director with Thomas Cook, director finance with SR Steel, group CFO for Suzlon India, and as I mentioned, presently the managing director of Caprians India Limited. There are so many awards and accolades to his credit, and he was nominated by Business Today as the best CFO in India, as CFO 100 in 2010 and 2012 by CFO India magazine. If I come to the series 4 of the Power Talk initiative, which we have started in Independent Directors Data Bank, today we are going to hear from him his experiences and the moments of truth while authoring 2 of his very popular books. Of course, 1 hour is very short, as I was discussing with Robin when I was inviting him, and he kindly accepted our invite, that discussing the gist and the moments of truth of 2 books in 1 hour is a Herculean task. One of the book is Who Cheats and How, where he captures his experiences working with the companies. Of course, not those who have cheated, but working across the sector, learning about other companies, scanning what is happening around in the corporate sector when corporate frauds are taking place, with the wisdom he has captured working across best-in-class companies. And another book, which is almost another side of the coin, Who Blunders and How. So what he tries to articulate with the help of these 2 books, that sometimes the companies commit mistakes. They may be because of a portable ignorance state of mind or state of affairs, where unknowingly or with an absence of a long-termism approach, futuristic approach, or for any other reason they commit. But there are yet another mistakes which are well crafted deliberately, which we normally term as fraud. And Companies Act 2013 has been very wise for the first time in defining corporate frauds and adding provisions to it. I have read personally both the books and found them very interesting, but would not like to stand between the author, his experiences, and your learnings as well as questions. So very warm welcome to all of you for joining us in this initiative, especially in the festive time and holiday occasions when most of us are on travel. And very warm welcome to Robin for kindly accepting our invite and being with us for this very thought-provoking and stimulating discussion, which I'm looking forward. Over to you, Robin.
Thank you, Neeraj. Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon to all of you. Season's greetings and a very happy new year, a warm, very happy new year. Good wishes to all of you. We are just about a few hours ahead of the 2021. Most of us would like to forget 2020, I believe. And with new hope and sunshine is what we are going to start. Before I start, I see some messages here saying that there is no audio. So could you kindly confirm that audio is on? Can you all hear me? Because if you can't hear, it doesn't work. And I do understand there is the screen is also not very clear. What is written on the screen is inappropriate, incorrect. Perhaps we can get out of the screen. The IICA team, thank you. It's audible. I can hear. Some says yes, audio is okay. Fantastic. Good. Maybe the screen can be switched off because the screen is all garbage. Thank you. So we will transmit ourselves, ladies and gentlemen, to the world of frauds and of course mistakes, because I believe fraud is a mistake. But every mistake need not be a fraud. And ladies and gentlemen, my dear friends, thank you very much for joining this. As Dr. Gupta had explained to you, I've written 2 books. One is titled Who Cheats and How. It's on corporate scams and frauds. And I've written a book on Who Blunders and How. It's on all about business mistakes. Each of the books has more than 350 live examples. And I'm going to pick up a few from there or what's happening in the real life to let's say, discuss, have some hearty discussions for the next 55 minutes or so. My humble submission is, this is not a lecture from an institution, from a college. We are all practicing managers, and I'll be very happy to have a dialogue with you. You can put your questions on the chat box. I don't know whether you can unmute yourself and speak, but definitely I'll be happy to answer all your questions as much as possible. I'm also aware that most of you are either independent directors yourself or are hoping to become one. So most of you are IDs, either independent directors yourself or hoping to become one. And therefore, what happens in the boardroom, what you're supposed to do when there are frauds and mistakes taking place. Before I get into the roles of independent directors, and I would like to, as I go along, I would try to shift my frauds and mistakes stories between what if you are sitting in a board which is committing that, and what if you're sitting in the board and you don't know what the hell is happening. What if you are sitting in a board and suddenly you realize they have done something like that, what you just spoke about? The other day, many of you would have woken up with a news item, ladies and gentlemen, about, I think, 2 weeks back, that, all along I have been having honey. In the morning, I have been told that to have honey, it builds immunity, and if you have honey, all your problems of COVID-19 is gone. Only to realize that I was having sugar and not honey. Because when I was told that I was the Dabur honey, the Patanjali honey, the Zandu honey, all has sugar. It's not honey. Now, what do you think about this? And they say, only Saffola honey doesn't have sugar. It is honey. Oh, it's all about honey money. And that's what's shocking. Shocking to say the least. The Dabur, a more than 100-year-old organization. Patanjali, to my mind, is the fastest growing FMCG company in India. Imami, which is Zandu, is an extremely, extremely popular company in the eastern part of India. And they're all market leaders, only to realize that they were fudging honey. I don't know what the truth is. Neither you know. The truth may come out sometime later, may not ever come out. But the question is, I always believe, ladies and gentlemen, if there is smoke, there is some fire. And that, if we think about it, that if there is some smoke, and there is indeed some dark smoke around us. And if you are sitting in the board of Dabur and you read the newspaper item or WhatsApp message that your company was actually not testing for sugar or honey, and it was not doing the so-called NMR test, which is called the nuclear magnetic test, which apparently has to go to Germany to do that. And many of these honey, I understand 11 out of 13 brands were found to be having sugar. Take another example which has happened just about, I think, a week back. I was told by the newspapers and televisions and the WhatsApp messages that, you know what, there was one particular TV channel called Republic TV was saying we are number one, but only to realize they were actually not number one. There was some number two or number three. What was being told now, and what we understand, is the BRC, the Broadcasting Audience Research Council, is saying that apparently the TRPs were fudged. But I don't know what the truth is, but the question is, if you were part of the BRC, you were part of Times Now, you're part of Republic TV, and as in an independent director, what would you do? What is it that we need to do when you hear something like that? Maybe it is half-truth, maybe it is completely false, or maybe it is completely true. So, ladies and gentlemen, both these examples you will realize, if it is true, they were gross frauds. One, it's a food fraud, and second, it is fraud on ethics. It is also a huge mistake. It's a mistake by organizations which is selling food, which is like Dabur or, for instance, Patanjali, mixing something which definitely ought not to have been there. So the dichotomy is, ladies and gentlemen, that when you are an independent director, and I just want to spend few minutes about it, because most of you are, I presume, or most of you would like to become one. What is the responsibility of an independent director? Is the responsibility all about catching frauds and pointing mistakes? My dear friends, no. The primary responsibility of independent director, contrary to our popular belief, we believe that independent directors are there for good governance. Independent directors, ladies and gentlemen, of course, are there for good governance, but there is some overarching desire, is that an independent director or the group of independent directors protects the interest of the minority shareholders. The primary responsibility of independent directors is to protect the interest of the minority shareholders. Because if you are a majority shareholder, if somebody belongs to the majority shareholder, they need not be protected. They would do what they believe is appropriate for them to do. They might do the wrong things. They might not follow the governance. They may not do what we are supposed to do as an organization, and therefore independent directors comes into picture to protect the rights of the minority shareholders, because they perhaps are trampled over by the majority shareholders most of the time. And the second, and of course that's a fallout of that, is that we must have good governance. And good governance, ladies and gentlemen, is not about holding board meetings. It's not about having a quarterly board meeting, putting the minutes on time, and submitting the minutes to the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, or the Registrar of Companies. That's not good governance. Ladies and gentlemen, the good governance is all about producing goods and services of appropriate quality at consistent and appropriate quality at an appropriate price. Most important is the goods and services must be produced of consistent quality at appropriate price. That's the responsibility of good governance. In order to do that, you may have to attend meetings once a quarter. You may have to do the minutes of the meeting. You may have to have a chairman of the meeting, chairperson of the meeting. You may have to have independent directors. Whatever it requires needs to be done. And therefore, as I go along with my stories of frauds and mistakes, you would perhaps think, what were the directors doing? What were the independent directors doing? Just I told you two small examples of stories which took place about 2 or 3 weeks ago. I sometimes wonder what the independent directors are even doing today. When you talk about frauds, I think the biggest a corporate one, which shook the corporate life out of India, is the Kingfisher Fraud or Mr. Vijay Mallya's episode. What did he do? In many of us, and most of us perhaps are old enough to realize that when it was 2008, 2009, and if you were asked to take an aircraft, or you were supposed to travel by air, and if your administration department was giving you a choice as to which airlines you would like to fly, chances are that you would have chosen Kingfisher Airlines in 2008, 2009. At that point of time, in 2008, 2009, the most popular airlines was Kingfisher. No question. It was a experience to fly that. At the same point of time, in fact, just to give you an example, just to take this example a little forward, that Kingfisher Airlines was actually started around 2002, 2003, along with another airlines called Indigo Airlines. Both of them started at the same time. Come 2008, 2009, Kingfisher became the most sought after airlines in India. All of us, I'm sure on this call, or most of us, I'm sure on this call, would have loved to fly Kingfisher those days. Only what happened to realize that in 2012, just think about it, ladies and gentlemen. In 2012, Kingfisher became bankrupt. They stopped flying. The last aircraft flew in July 2012. And it so happens, ladies and gentlemen, that in 2012, Indigo declared the highest profit. The highest profit, yes. They both started at the same time. One became the most preferred airlines in 2008, 2009, outwitting the other. And only that other one, which was doing so flamboyantly, became bankrupt, and Indigo declared the highest profits. So what was the mistake? What happened? What did Kingfisher do wrong? I have to tell you the story a little. So, everything was going well till Mr. Vijay Mallya took too much of debt, and he borrowed, and the bankers were after him. Come 2012, he was not able to pay back the loan interest and in principal outstandings to the bankers, and of course he could not fly anymore. But how did this truth come out? How did people get to know what happened? What was the story behind Mr. Kingfisher? In 2015, November, State Bank of India declared Mr. Vijay Mallya a willful defaulter. A willful defaulter is someone, if you borrow money from a bank and you do not give the money back, or you do not pay your interest on time for about 3 months, which is 90 days, you will be called a non-performing asset, NPA. But if you have the ability to pay, that means you have the money to pay, but you don't pay the money to the banks, it is called, you then are classified as a willful defaulter. Mr. Vijay Mallya was classified as a willful defaulter. That means he had the money to pay but did not pay. Please understand that, ladies and gentlemen. Because sometimes I am told by many that, you know what, Mr. Mallya wants to repay everything, but the government of India is not taking it. But why didn't he pay back in 2012, 2013, 2014? If he wanted to pay, why is he trying to pay in 2020? We will not get into it because that's a long story, I think. But it's also not a part of the scheme of things of today. So having said that, Mr. Mallya has a birthday every year, and his birthday happens to be on 18th of every December, 1/8. And 18th of December 2015 was his 60th birthday, 60. And as you know, he's the most flamboyant Indian businessman at that point of time, and he has his 60th birthday. So announced that he will have a huge birthday in his villa at Goa. So and actually, if you go to the Google now, you will figure out that he announced that he's going to have a birthday, because you can do the search even today. He announced in the public domain that he's going to have a gala party in 2015 December, where he has already stopped paying his airline staff in 2012, 3 years before. Because he announced in the press, there was a young boy who happens to be a photographer, press photographer, he calls Mr. Malia saying, Mr. Malia, you're having a great party, but you haven't called me. So he said, you have not been called. Come. This party was being held in Goa. And then obviously this young boy was paid his airfare. He goes to the Goa and he finds it's a massive party. And who was this young boy? This young boy was the press photographer of Bombay Times. So because he's a photographer, he had his camera with him. He goes inside the massive bungalow where the Kingfisher Villa actually, where the party was taking place. And he saw that the who's who of the Bollywood and Hollywood was present. So he clicked a lot of photographs. He was very happy, extreme happy, and he took all the private photographs. And he went back to Bombay Times, I think, on 21st or 22nd, and he filed his newspaper to his editor, all the pictures. His editor was so happy, Bombay Times editor. He said, wow, you attended a private party, and that too of Mr. Malia, and you have all these photographs. Very nice. So these photographs of the party, big party, was published in Bombay Times newspaper on 25th of December, 2015. You can well imagine 25th December is a Christmas holiday. We just enjoyed it a few days back. And normally people are at home on 25th of December. Most of us are busy people. In fact, today, with the post-COVID, maybe many of us are not reading newspapers anymore. But those days, newspapers was the only source of information. Even before pandemic, I think newspaper was very popular. Perhaps it is less popular today, but be as it may. So there was one gentleman who would normally not open the Bombay Times. He's very busy, but it was a holiday, 25th December, Christmas holiday on around 11 o'clock in the morning. He opens his newspaper and he opens the Times of Bombay Times. And when he opens the Bombay Times, on the page 3, he sees the photographs of this party, Mr. Kingfisher, Vijay Malia's party going on. Who was this gentleman who opened the newspaper? The busy man was none other than Reserve Bank of India Governor, Mr. Raghuraman Rajan that time. So Raghuraman Rajan was mad by seeing this newspaper photographs of his party. He immediately picked up his call at around 11 o'clock and called his friend that time, the chairperson of State Bank of India, Mrs. Arundhati Bhattacharya. He calls Arundhati Bhattacharya and asks Arundhati, are you at home? He said, yes, sir. Can you open Bombay Times page 3? He said, yes, sir. And she opened the newspaper and she found that, that the party, and of course she immediately understood the gravity of the situation. So she was, so obviously both of them realized the matter is very serious. Raghuraman Rajan asked Arundhati Bhattacharya, that time the chairperson of State Bank of India, that Arundhati, if I would have taken from you a bank loan, a car loan, if I would have taken from your car loan of rupees 4 lakhs, and if I wouldn't have paid back my car loan, wouldn't you have taken away my car? Why? Shouldn't you have taken away the car? She said, yes, sir. Then if that is so, Mr. Malia, you have already declared him a willful defaulter last month, which is November 2015. Why is the Kingfisher Villa still with him? So she said, I agree with you, sir. This should not happen with him. And Raghuraman Rajan says that, Arundhati, you know what? This gentleman needs to be arrested. And she said, I agree with you, sir. So obviously it took a long time to move the court, and because there were, I think, 23 or 24 bankers, all of them had to keep it secret, the matter. They had to move the matter to the Supreme Court. So on 1st of March 2016, the court took up the hearing of, at that point of time, it was very difficult to say an entrepreneur will be arrested. So what they thought that they would first confiscate his passport. So the Supreme Court was moved on 1st of March, saying that Mr. Malia's passport should be confiscated. The Supreme Court heard the argument for about 10 minutes, and in the open court, the judge dictated that his passport should be confiscated. Only to realize after a few minutes, a man comes and saying, sir, Mr. Vijay Malia has flown off the country last night. He's gone. He has gone. He flew out on 2nd of March And this hearing was taking place on 3rd of March. So he flew out by taking 14 large bags with his girlfriend, Bombay, London. In fact, many of you would have taken the Bombay-London flight. Jet Airways used to fly. 12 baje ka flight hota tha. If you remember, many of you would have flown that. And he took that 12 o'clock midnight flight, first class flight seat, and he went away forever. Mr. Raghuraman Rajan got wild. He said, I did everything. And still this man flies away. And we couldn't catch him. So what basically he did then, and I'm cutting the long story short, because we are trying to focus on the frauds and mistakes in our business lives. First, of course, sometimes I wonder what was the board of directors of Kingfisher doing all this while. But having said that, we can argue till the cows go home. But what happened is, this particular episode, why I gave you this little story, this particular episode had changed the world of business in India forever. Forever, ladies and gentlemen. And let me tell you why. Just the next few minutes, you will be able to realize why. And I'm happy to answer questions on this in case there is not lack of clarity. Okay. Raghuram Rajan. Yes. Sorry, Anup. I think I spelled that right. It's not Raghuraman Rajan. It is Raghuram. Yeah, you're right. Correct. So having said that, what went wrong? What happened is two things the Reserve Bank of India did. And of course, under Mr. Rajan's leadership, he said that, okay, let me take you 30 seconds before. The 30 seconds before is Indian entrepreneurs were always struggling with their money. So Indian banking system is to have a system of evergreening. And many of you, and most of you are senior officers, senior people. Evergreening is something that the bank gives you new money to pay back the old money. And that's called evergreening. And therefore, under some pretext, and I have done it myself, the bank, under the pretext of giving another new project funding, but basically they would give another funding so that the old money can be paid back. Mr. Rajan stopped evergreening on 31st of March 2016. Today, it is almost impossible. I think 99 or 98% or 97%, it is impossible to do evergreening. The starting point for stopping evergreening was this little fraud, if I may say, or a mistake. I don't know which way you want to state. The second episode, the second thing which has happened is that till 31st March 2016, the banks were not declaring the non-performing assets appropriately. What is non-performing asset? Non-performing asset are those loans which are not being refunded or serviced. They are not being serviced for 90 days. If it fails for 90 days, on the 91st day, the loan becomes a non-performing asset, NPA. And what is to happen if you go back, maybe many of you remember also, if you go back in 2015, 2014, the NPA declaration, banks are okay, little NPA, little here, there. Raghuram Rajan said, no, on 31st of March 2016, every bank must declare all the non-performing assets. Everyone must declare. And if you go back, you can do a Google search, you will figure out that the highest ever enhancement or quantum of NPA declaration was in end March 2016. And of course, the fallout was on end June 2016. Why am I saying all this? One change you will realize has happened is evergreening has stopped. So which means that if an entrepreneur wants to now fail in repaying the loans to the banking system, that to go to the bank under the garb of getting a new loan to pay back the old loan is almost now ruled out. The second is this NPA issue. The NPA, non-performing asset of this country, you will, if you open the newspapers, you will find it is about 10 to 11%. Ladies and gentlemen, it is not 10 to 11%. The World Bank has actually said it's around 18% in India. Why? Because all those accounts, all those bank accounts which have been restructured, even 60-70% of the restructured accounts will also not be repaid. More importantly, what is the business of a bank? The business of a bank is the bank gives loans to you and me by taking money from you and me. So when the bank takes money from you and me, it's a loan to the bank. But bank also has its own money, which is called the capital. So normally the bank has about 4 rupees own capital, 4%, if I may say loosely, and your and my money of about 96 rupees or 96%. Since then, as you know, the Basel III has come into a picture, and the Basel III has raised this so-called 4 rupee of own money to about 10%, as you know. So even assuming a bank has 10% of his own money and 90% of your and my money, and if there is 18% NPA, 18%, ladies and gentlemen, does it not mean that some of our money will never come back? Does it not mean that? So what happened is, since that time, after this NPA was declared, after this, the scenario to understand the gravity of this problem of banking system, the banking system starts getting corrected. And one of the fallout of banking system getting corrected is the Insolvency Banking Code. I know most of you are not lawyers. You may not be able to appreciate this. But what is now happening is, if an entrepreneur or a company does not pay back the loans on time, his or her company can now be auctioned. And that is why SR Steel has become ArcelorMittal Steel and Bhushan Steel has become Tata Steel, because they had to lose control of their companies because they did not pay back the money on time to the banking system. So my third story on Mr. Malia or the Kingfisher was, I explained to you to say that that fraud, that mistake on the part of the organization has actually changed the business world of commerce forever. And it so happens that the little boy who had the camera, had he not taken the pictures, had the pictures not been taken on 25th of December, had Mr. Rajan not been at home on 25th of December, I don't know whether I would have told you the third story today. Okay, let me move on, because I have loads of stories to tell you as to what's happening in the corporate world. But one more story, which perhaps might be of some interest to many of you, because it's a story of both a fraud and a mistake. I will tell you a story of Ranbaxy. Ranbaxy, you must have heard, is a pharmaceutical company. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm only sharing stories which are in the public domain, because in a talk like this, I cannot share stories for which I have no formal data. But these are all in the public domain. You can check it out as and when you have time later on. Now, Ranbaxy was the second largest pharmaceutical company in India in 2002-2003. And it was growing very, very fast. It was really growing fast. In 2005, there is one gentleman who joined the company, Ranbaxy, in their Gurgaon head office as the research director. And this gentleman's name was Mr. Dinesh Thakur. So Dinesh Thakur joins, but after he joins for about 3 to 4 months, he realizes that something is wrong with this organization. He's not happy with what's going on. And he's little unsure as to what's going on. And he wasn't thinking that something is wrong amiss in this organization. And this is the second largest pharma company in the world. Second largest pharma company in India. Just about 7 or 8 months after Mr. Dinesh Thakur joined the company, he has a little son, and I think 3-year-old son, and his son got a very bad ear infection. So he takes his son to the doctor, a pediatrician, a lady pediatrician, and then showed his son to the doctor. The doctor immediately wrote down a prescription and, of course, suggested an antibiotic. Now I will go back for 30 seconds or 1 minute to explain to you what does an India pharmaceutical sector normally do. And many of you belong to that pharmaceutical sector, I'm sure. So some of the companies, and most of the Indian pharmaceutical companies, either make drugs which are off patent internationally, or make bioequivalence in India, which is bioequivalence means that medicine will do the same characteristics, will have the same characteristics as the original one, but perhaps at the 1/10 of the cost. So Ranbaxy was in fact doing bioequivalence of many medicines, and Dinesh Thakur was a research scientist. So when this pediatrician wrote down a particular medicine, it was an antibiotic. Dinesh Thakur found out, "Arey, ye to hamara office mein hai. I have it in my office because I have manufactured it. The company has made the bioequivalence." So he goes to his office rather than buying it from the shop, and he picks up the medicine and applies to his son for about 2 days. 2 days is gone, and his son's fever has not come down. Did not come down, sorry. He was very worried. So he took his son again to the pediatrician. After 2 days, back again. Fortunately, the pediatrician was very intelligent. So she asked, normally what happens? You go to a doctor assumes after medicine diya hoga, he or she will give another medicine. But maybe if another medicine, maybe the disaster would have been written, and I'll tell you how. So she asked Dinesh Thakur, what medicine have you given him? So he said, I'm a research director at Ranbaxy. We make bioequivalence. I had this medicine in my office. The chemical composition of this of this antibiotic given him. He said, no. She said, no. You go to the chemist shop, buy a Glaxo medicine, manufactured by Glaxo. She actually said, just manufactured by Glaxo, GSK. So she then wrote down the name of the medicine again. She said, manufactured by GSK, and Dinesh Thakur went up and picked up the medicine, and lo and behold, within 2 hours of the medicine given to his son, the fever went down. And he then realized that there is a huge problem. He didn't understand what is the problem, but he understood the medicine which I picked up from my office did not work. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a little longish story. A lot of things happened thereafter. Mr. Thakur was then sacked from his company because the company in 2005, 2006, his company thought that Mr. Thakur is asking too many questions. In fact, he was threatened with dire consequences. He left. He had to obviously resign. He was sacked. Then he complained to the Foods and Drugs Authority of US, saying, looks to me that there is some problem with the drugs of Ranbaxy. And in 2012, believe me, 2012, this happened in 2006, after 5 or 6 years, the FDA figured out that Ranbaxy wasn't making medicine. They were making placebos. Yes, ladies and gentlemen. That many of the medicines, I don't know most of it or not, many of the medicines which were perhaps tom-tommed as heart medicine or liver medicine, or I don't know whether cancer medicine or not, whether that was there told or not, I have no idea. But they were not making medicines. They were just making placebos. Means they had a tablet and capsule, looked as if it contained everything, but it did not. And Ranbaxy was then fined $500 million, 3,500 crores. Even till today, they have not been able to pay the then owners, Shivinder and Malvinder Singh. And since then, a lot of things have happened. They were jailed, as you know. Perhaps you know that. And the company has ultimately become bankrupt. I sometimes wonder, what was the board of members doing in Ranbaxy in those times? I sometimes wonder. It is not only a fraud on mankind, but it's a massive mistake. Massive mistake of a brand. Just imagine what massive mistake Dabur has done to themselves. Forget about fraud. I don't know if it's fraud or not. It's a massive mistake. A company which is of such huge name, and it takes years and years to build names. How does a company and its board, even if they allow this to happen, whether they know it or not, it's $1 million question. Maybe some of them knew, maybe one of them knew. I cannot understand the board knows nothing or knew nothing when all this was happening. Think of the situation in Kingfisher. What went wrong there? Why did the company go bankrupt? And it's not my words. It is the words of the Enforcement Directorate, that the money taken as a loan for the purpose of airlines was siphoned off and money laundered. It was used for something else. Maybe he bought his F1 team, F1 cars, Mercedes cars, horses. I don't know, whatever he would have done. Is it possible that none in the system knew about it? Is it not a fraud and a mistake altogether? So, ladies and gentlemen, I know it's 4:40. Let me see if I can try to summarize, not summarize, tell you one or two more stories perhaps, because there are loads and loads of them. If you ever have interest, please do read the two books. But I wanted to leave it with the thought that most and all of your business leaders, as a business, what are those two things which makes a business sick? I wouldn't say three also. I would say two. Believe me, ladies and gentlemen, there are two things which happens. The business becomes bankrupt. There could be the third one, which I will come to. The first, which makes a business bankrupt, is a fraud. Is unethical practice. You cannot do fraud for a long time. It's not possible. You can't have a 100-year-old company, let's say Hindustan Unilever, Brook Bond, or Coca-Cola, or for the matter, Walmart. These companies have not become 100, 150 years old by doing fraud on you and me. That's not possible. They would have done some wrong things here and there, but that's because of human errors perhaps, but not fraud. The second is when they take more debt. They borrow more than what they can chew. They borrow heavily, and the moment they borrow heavily, when they are not able to pay back their interest on principal liabilities, willy-nilly the problem starts. Either willful default starts, as I explained to you, or the company becomes sick, or then fraud takes over. So the two most important reasons why a company can become a bankrupt, ladies and gentlemen, I know I'm speaking to the independent directors, and I know most of you are, and many of you will become one. It's the fraud and debt, D-E-B-T, debt. Debt is a death trap, D-A-T-H, D-E-A-T-H. The third one, if at all I may have to say, is economic condition. But economic condition which includes competition, imports from China, and so on and so forth. But believe me, ladies and gentlemen, I think you will not be able to figure out even one instance in this world where a company became bankrupt because of economic condition. Either definitely they would have had more debt, and therefore they couldn't borrow money, and therefore they become bankrupt, or there was a fraud behind it. Most probably it is so. Having said that, therefore, I would just like to tell you, the debt is a double-edged sword. The biggest mistake, because I'm supposed to talk to you about mistake also, time being short, there are so many types of mistakes an organization can do, and there are loads and loads of them, is debt, taking more debt. Debt is a double-edged sword. It is a double-edged sword. It is required to progress in your business. The other way to do that is it can kill an organization. It is a wonderful thing to happen because it's easy money, and it's a lousy thing to happen because it's money which can kill a business forever. Just think of a wonderful organization. We all talk about the most successful Indian entrepreneur in India is Mr. Ambani, Mukesh Ambani, no question about it. When his father died, and both the brothers, Mukesh and Anil Ambani, they divided the wealth of the father. Mukesh and Ambani and Anil Ambani, both of them got more or less about $42-43 billion. Yes, billion. 1 billion means 7,000 crores. So both of them got about $40-42 billion. Mr. Mukesh Ambani today is now worth about $55-56 billion. And Anil Ambani's brother, who got $42 billion 10 years back, is bankrupt. He has officially told the court, I have no money. I am bankrupt. Have you thought about yourself why Mr. Anil Ambani has gone bankrupt? Why Mukesh has been most successful in the world, in India? If you go a little behind and go little, perhaps the two words which I used, and it is in the public domain, that's what most of the investigation agents are saying, that there has been unethical practices and over leveraging of the balance sheet, which has created what Mr. Anil Ambani is here today. Think of one of the finest brands in India. Best brands, best airports. GVK makes best airports. GMR makes best airports. It's a pride of the country. Both the companies are today in deep shambles. There are unethical practice episodes also being sprinkled on them, unfortunately. But why? These two companies created such huge assets, wonderful assets, pride of the nation, and today almost they are in the verge of bankruptcy. Debt is the reason. DEBT. Again, the mistake which these companies do, that they think there is no tomorrow, God will come and help me. Maybe we, the finance guys, have spoiled many of these entrepreneurs, saying, पैसा लेके आएंगे, पैसा कहाँ से लेके आएंगे? भगवान तो पैसा देते नहीं. God doesn't create money. The businesses, we have to create money. Another great organization which created wonderful real estate properties in and around Delhi, JP Group. Maybe some of you are staying in their colonies, bankrupt. Why? Because, again, debt and a sprinkle of unethical practices. Great Indian brand, Videocon, great Indian brand. See where it is today, bankrupt. Why? Have you asked yourself why? Same situation. Borrowed more than what they can chew, and of course, sprinkle of unethical practices when we hear ICICI Bank episode. So, ladies and gentlemen, debt is a huge mistake which most organizations do. Fraud, of course, is a mistake. No one should do that. And debt, of course, is one more. Because I'm speaking to the independent directors, one more mistake which perhaps we don't talk about, maybe I would like to leave a thought with you, which perhaps most of you will not believe that what I'm saying is true, is mergers and acquisition, M&A. M&A is sometimes a big mistake. Just for information, ladies and gentlemen, sitting in the board, you will have to approve M&As, I'm sure. 70% of M&As, 70% of M&As don't work. 70% don't work. And you think of organizations, great organizations, a wonderful organization was, let's say, just to give an example with which I was also associated for some time, was Suzlon Energy, world's number 5, world's 5th largest wind turbine company, became world's 3rd largest. Today, where it is no longer there, almost not there. Why? Because they did an M&A. They acquired a German renewable energy power company for $1.6 billion, for which he had no money to pay. And see where the company has gone. It's an ethical company, by the way. Of course, it had to take more debt, and that's the reason. And the M&A went bad because the Indians and Germans couldn't see eye to eye. So I wouldn't go keep going giving examples because time being short, it's already 4:47. But as an independent director, as a person who is supposed to manage the organization, a thought which I want to keep with your mind is that when you talk about this first word called fraud or ethics, because that's what we always talk about, governance, ethics, there are 2 types of frauds, ladies and gentlemen. One is the micro fraud, which we always talk about. What is a micro fraud? Micro fraud is the cashier runs away with the money, the purchase manager takes bribe, the sales manager sells and doesn't make the collections or put it in the bank stiller. These are all micro frauds. This can be solved through internal control mechanism, internal audit, all that. But what about the macro fraud? That's where the problem lies, that fraud which has been structured by the entrepreneur himself. All the examples, most of the examples which I told you, ladies and gentlemen, it's not a micro fraud. It's not the cashier ran away with the money. It was thought through by the highest authority. Whether the directors were involved, whether independent directors were involved, I don't know. But whether they were not knowing at all, $1 million question. But ladies and gentlemen, please think too, that micro fraud is always what we discuss perhaps in the board meetings. But please be aware, is there structured fraud going around in their organization? Structurally, is it a fraudulent system? Structurally, is money laundering taking place? Structurally, is willful default taking place? Structurally, is the banks being lied with facts which is not there? Structurally, is the balance sheet and profit and loss account doctored? Structurally. Now, these are thoughts which you must have. The macro and the micro fraud, ladies and gentlemen, because otherwise we will always miss the wood for the tree. Having said that, I know all of you, ladies and gentlemen, it's our dream to become successful. It's your dream to remain successful. So I would use the word dream as an acronym to explain 5 principles when we manage a board. When we, the independent directors, manage a board, the 5 principles, and not 6, not 4. The dream principles. D. Dream D. D is debt. Ladies and gentlemen, please be careful on your debt. More debt is a killer, and I explained to you, please be careful on whenever the company is taking debt. Dream, R. R is risk. We don't talk about risk management. There's no decision in the world which doesn't have a risk. It could have been little risk, massive risk, slight risk. We always know that no risk, no gain. That's perfectly correct. No risk, no gain. But having said that, how much risk should an organization take? Why did ILFs become bankrupt? Have you understood how did ILFs become bankrupt? Did you know that? ILFs, a simple thing what they did, and all of you finance guys here will be able to understand better that they borrowed short and lent long, which means they borrowed for 6 months because it's an infrastructure lending company. It's an infrastructure NBFC, non-banking financial company. But they borrowed for 6 months but lent for 6 years. How is it possible? What about the risk management? What if I cannot re-borrow for 6 months more? Because a person who has taken a borrowing for 6 years, he is not going to give me back for 6 years my money. So I have to keep refinancing my loans, borrowing, which they could not. And 2018, they became bankrupt. Risk. DRE. E, of course, we discussed ethics. Fraud. Please be careful. Macro and micro nature of that. A. DREA. A is acquisition. I told you mergers and acquisition is a big mistake people does. So be careful when an acquisition is taking place. 70% doesn't work. It's not my figure. It is Harvard Business School's international experience. You go around the world and you will feel fine that 70% M&As have failed. And the last one, dream, M, is manpower, people. So the biggest thing what we need, we are all good as our people. You have to focus on your people. The quality of management which we have, the quality of people which we have, the quality of mindset which we have, and most important, the attitude they have. So dream, debt, risk, R, risk, E, ethics, A, acquisition, M, manpower. Ladies and gentlemen, if you take care of these 5, chances are that you shall be a very successful independent director. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Happy to take all the questions. I do have some questions I know in the chat box, which I'll try to answer, but over to all of you. Thank you. So maybe I can start. Neeraj, you would like to handle it? Dr. Gupta, with the questions? Or you want me to read it out? Okay, I'll handle it. So let me go through the questions that you have, and then you can keep putting it down. There is a question is, but it still takes RTI probing to get the names of willful defaulters in public. Yes, it is true. You know why willful defaulters, and I think why willful defaulters' names are not in the public. Normally it should. Ethics does show it should. But perhaps what RBI is thinking is if once a person's name comes as a willful defaulter, his business life is over. Even if he or she wants to correct himself or herself. So therefore, to give a chance, I believe they are thinking willful defaulter list should not be made public. But yes, we can argue till the cows go home. I believe, as you rightly mentioning, I think Prakash Bhai had said that naming and shaming is good, but how much naming and shaming we should do, it's $1 billion question. World across, they're still not following naming and shaming. They talk about it. The Institute of Chartered Accountants world across the world talk about it. All these professional bodies talk about it, but naming and shaming is still not happening. Then there's a question on, I think, IBC. There's Insolvency Banking Code. There was, of course, somebody say Raghuram Rajan's name was incorrectly pronounced by me. I'm sorry for that. The IBC norms these days keep changing faster than loans can be processed. No, sir. I think the question is by Shovik. Shovik, IBC has laws. Well, every law needs to be improved. So IBC is a new law, so it is under improvement. But because of the pandemic, the IBC was kept on hold up to 31st of December 2020. Now it has been kept on hold up to 31st of March 2021. So you have not heard of IBC situation for last 9 months because it was kept on hold. But yes, I think IBC is a very, very active law. It obviously needs a lot of tinkering all the time because of experiences. India is a very different country. I believe that's what they are trying to do. And I still have a lot of hope and faith on IBC. Most bad loans, Ranganathan said, most bad loans involve not only bad or dishonest business practices, but highly complicit conduct of very senior bank officers in letting things drift and not take timely action. That is true, sir. Unfortunately, there is hand in glove of the lender and the lendee. Yes, it's now almost known facts. More than 2,500 willful defaulters owe over 1.5 lakh crore rupees to the banks. Yes, it's a factual statement. Prakash, you are mentioning implementation of laws in India on whistleblower. Okay, you are right. This whistleblower is an important issue. Whistleblower things are not working on the way it should because in Indian society, whistleblowers are not getting protection. Most of the time, a whistleblower is a person who is thrown out of the society. He or she becomes an outcast. Very unfortunate. Whistleblower needs to be protected first, the identity, and second, no vindictive attitude. Unfortunately, you are right. The ecosystem in India of the whistleblower is not good. That's the biggest problem why the ethical practices are still not getting practiced because whistleblowers are not coming out as much as what they should do. So absolutely correct what you said. Why is Dabar free to do business even today? Oh, Dabar. Why is Dabar free to do business? Because they have still not been held that there was indeed what they were doing incorrect. So unless you are proven to be wrong, unless you are held guilty, as you know in law, you cannot be prosecuted. So that's where Dabar is in. I think that episode has done a lot of damage to the brand image. Of course, Indian memory is very short. We will forget very soon. Very, very soon we will forget. So hopefully also maybe the organization thinking that people will forget very soon. So we'll see what happens unless Saffola really fights Dabar out in the market and proves that Dabar was indeed doing something wrong. I would be surprised. There is a question by Ranganathan saying that I would be surprised the board would have known the adulteration of products when certifying agencies supposed to certify products periodically have not brought out any problem. Ranganathan, just to tell you the situation, I don't know, that is what is happening in the public domain. Apparently, these honey companies were not subjecting their product to the NMR test, which is that so-called nuclear magnetic test. They were not subjecting. And the NMR test would have only happened in Germany. They had to send products to Germany, get it tested and brought back, which I understand they did not take it. But the board was aware NMR test has to be done. I don't know. Whether the board was aware that NMR test they are not doing because they want to save money, I don't know. But the fact of the matter is that the problem is on the NMR test. Yes, what was the complicitness of the board? Of course, we would perhaps never be able to figure out. What is that one may look for or question when attending a board meeting to ascertain that all is well? Oh, Rashmi Desa. Rashmi, you have asked a question that before joining a board, how do you get to know all is doing well? You cannot figure out. You cannot figure out that everything is well. A management meeting does give you a little idea as to how they are thinking. Are they feeling? They're talking honestly? Are they transparent guys? So a management meeting helps a great deal. Of course, information in the public domain, as I said, if there is a smoke, there is a fire. In the public domain, if you have seen or smelled some smoke here and there, then maybe you need to think through as to what you're doing. So otherwise, it is very difficult to know that everything is well. There is a question. Apart from the reasons you have suggested, I also feel that expansion in unrelated business is always a major reason. Example, Metal Box and HMT going into bearing business. Yes, of course, business reasons, unrelated businesses, it is true. But HMT, if I may tell you, HMT is a classical case where they took, of course, it's a government company. They had obviously taken singularly more debt, and the government did not want to give more debt. Titan came into picture. The government said, I can't fight the Tatas, and therefore HMT. Basically, to cut the long story short, the government stopped funding, and therefore it became bankrupt. Metal Box is a long, long years away. When I was a kid, I know it was a Bengal company, Calcutta-based. I understand they were so successful that they used to serve liquor in the lunch because they had so much money. You're absolutely right. Their largest product was talcum powder tins. If you remember, we used when we were kids, we used to talcum powder in the tins. The Metal Box was the king of talcum powders, and the talcum powder suddenly changed into cardboard boxes. Metal Box got stuck in the metal businesses. They never expanded, but they did not. You are absolutely right. They did not expand based on information available in the public domain. That they did not expand, and they had enough money, but they did not. So it's a management failure. But I think what I hear was there was a fraud amongst managers. That's what I hear. It's 30, 40 years before, very difficult to say. But yes, but you are right. Metal Box is an example, perhaps, where they were very, very, they just did not change with respect to time. Sure, of course. You see, my question, was fraud and debt makes a company bankrupt. The bankruptcy was my tipping point. A company can then close themselves, can decide not to function anymore, can decide that this is not the way I can do business, I want to do something else. But that may not be for fraud and debt. But fraud and debt results in bankruptcy. That's what I wanted to say, perhaps, ladies and gentlemen. It is difficult for independent directors to find out something fraudulent is going on. Then how do you say what were the independent directors doing? Now, I am not saying what are the independent directors doing. Should not is the society not asking we the independent directors when the fraud takes place, what were the independent directors doing? Does the society have not the right to ask the question? Does the government have not the right to ask the independent directors the question, what you were doing? As the society is asking questions to the auditors. They're asking the auditors, what were you doing? And auditors are also jailed, as you know. They're taken to task. Their licenses are getting cancelled. But what about you and me? I'm an independent director myself. Do I have no responsibility whatsoever? A question which all of us need to think. Yes, I think there was one more. NMR test is not prescribed test. Honey of these 11 companies was passing test is prescribed by BIS codes. Hence, no legal action may be possible. Yes, Ashok Khuranaji, what you are saying is what these 11 companies are saying. Time will say whether NMR test was required or BIS test was required. But the question here is, it's not NMR test or BIS test. That's not the question, Khuranaji. The question here is, did this 11 brands of honey, did have sugar or not? And how do you figure out sugar? The only way to figure out sugar, I understand, and I'm not a chemical technologist, NMR test figures out sugar. And when they did the NMR test, they found it has sugar. Nothing prevented them not to add sugar. They could have easily not added sugar. That's it. We don't want NMR test or BIS test. We only do not want honey with sugar. Okay. Maybe it is a little controversial. But my dear friends, today my talk was not on success. Today's talk was on failures. So therefore, my talk of last 1 hour was a negative talk, unfortunately. We talked about frauds, we talked about failures, we talked about bankruptcies, we talked about perhaps independent directors or the auditors not doing the task. So it was a little negative, on the negative side of the story. I would love to talk to you one day on all the stories of successes, and there are millions of them. Neeraj, is there any question you have? The ISA team, please.
Yeah, I'm Shushanto here. Dr. Gupta, he has some important phone call with the ministry, so that's the reason he couldn't participate. And thank you so much, Ravin sir. It's our privilege, and I really like the way you presented it, because examples are the best things which makes us believe that there are something which is always in place and we are evidencing them. So that's the way you have. But at the same time, these are the negative examples you have told, but there are a lot of learnings in it. And these learnings are meant for us to make ourselves slightly more cautious and be careful about our next journey as an independent director or whatever the roles we are playing. Thank you so much, Ravin, and thank you for your deliberation of showing us new stories about the positive parts. We'll be loving to hear it as soon as possible. We'll work out for that. And it is an excellent one. And I have seen so many comments are still pouring in. And of course, I mean, paucity of time is always there. And thank you all the participants. And I'm sure you are all benefited by this talk. I will say it's an excellent talk for that matter. Ravin sir, nice to know about this and wish you all the best. And all the participants, Happy New Year. And let's make our life much, much easier in the new year to come. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ravin sir, again. Happy New Year.
God bless you. God bless you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And with this, we will close the program here. And I know that probably a couple of days from now, we will host this program as a video recording to our website in the ID portal. And we will have enough time to go for an offline viewing as well. With that, we'll close here. Thank you so much. Thank you, sir. Bye. Bye.